So next on the schedule, there is a big question right now. What's the difference between consciousness and thought? We discussed it to an extent at one of the recent gatherings here at the Villa Amio. What's the difference between consciousness and thought? And it's a difficult one to address. And Linda, would you write that on the board, up at the just top like a headline, consciousness versus thought?
Okay.
It's a little bit of a difficult one because they're kind of closely aligned, but yet they're very, very different. And what I want to do right now is to assist you in understanding the difference. But so often they get tangled into each other. And then you categorize everything as a thought, and you react different to thoughts than you do to consciousness. So what is the difference between consciousness and thought? And I boiled it down to this. Very, very simple, easy to remember. I like doing easy to remember things. Remember, dear Linda, how we did the easy to remember in a recent workshop, that you don't always want to use words. Words can be so limiting because you're communicating now energetically. So I came up with a wonderful little saying that's very, very memorable as to not have to define everything in words. And that little saying was, do you remember what it was? Yes, you do. She didn't want to say, words can be turds.
I did not want to say that.
It's that simple.
I did not want to say that.
No, words can be turds. And when
I did not want to say that.
And I explained that turd is an ancient Greek word that means kind of messy and what?
You made that up.
I made that up. I totally made that up. But as I told the attendees at the workshop, you'll never forget that when you say, oh, it's so hard not to use words when I'm being in energy communication and my mind slips into words and I slip into words. And yeah, that's when I say, yeah, you don't need words, really. Words can be turds. They can stop the natural open expression. But that's not the point I wanted to make for the board here. How to tell the difference between consciousness and thoughts. And it's real simple. Ellipses or ellipsis. Ellipses. 4 dots. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you just put 4 great big dots there on the board. 4 dots. Now, typically the ellipses, I'll have Linda write that in just a moment. Typically the ellipses are 3 dots, but we're going to use 4 to kind of remind ourselves and set it apart from other uses of ellipses. So, ... Would you write the word ellipses plural? Or you can write both words. Ellipsis.
Right below?
Yes. Ellipsis and ellipses. English word meaning at the end of a phrase, ... And that's how you tell the difference between consciousness and thought. That's all right. It's a difficult word to spell. It's with 2 L's. So ellipses and ellipsis. And we'll go through it in just a moment as soon as Linda figures out.
Or cis?
SES. Kind of a inside joke, you could say. Ellipses. Ellipses is usually 3 dots we'll use for ellipses. So next page, please. So in helping to understand the difference between consciousness and thought, so here is consciousness. I am that I am. Write that on the board. I am that I am, 4 dots. That's consciousness. I mean, it's put into words, yes, but it's not super defined. And the 4 dots at the end mean that now go into the experience. Well, it's not defined. It's open-ended. It's a feeling now that can then go into anything, an experience. It can go into a thought. I am that I am, and then 4 dots. The thought on that can be many things. If you were to categorize and say, okay, here's the thought. You don't need to write that down. Here's the thought. I'm not sure who I am. That's a thought. Or I am Giuseppe, the sculptor. That's a thought. I am 66 years old and feeling fine. That's a thought. Those are thoughts, and they end in a period. I am a human on the planet, period. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But consciousness is open-ended. It's I am that I am. And then the ellipses. That's kind of consciousness. The difference between consciousness and thought is the difference between an ellipses and a period. There's many others. I exist. If you write that on the board. That with 4 dots. That's consciousness. I exist. It's a feeling. It doesn't need a lot of definition.
Ellipses?
Yes. It doesn't need a lot of definition. It's consciousness. I exist. If that were to go into thought, it could be anything from, I wonder what I'm doing here, or I feel myself in the human body, or I wonder how long I'm going to exist. Those are thoughts. And just energetically feel the difference. I exist. It's consciousness. It's an awareness. I exist. And then a thought would be, I wonder how old I'm going to be when I die. That's a thought. Not that it's bad, not that it's anything, but to understand the difference between consciousness and thought is to understand the difference between yourself as a master and yourself as a human. Another one to write on the board. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day. That is consciousness, and followed by the ellipses. It's a beautiful day. You get up in the morning, you step outside, and truly, at its highest form, you don't even need those words. I'm using them here. You could just do ellipses. You could just take a deep breath into the day, ellipses, ... To be continued, more to come, to be experienced. It's a beautiful day. That's consciousness. It's a feeling. And then the thought is, it's very sunny. The thought is, I wonder what I'm going to be doing the rest of the day. The thought is, well, I wonder if a storm's going to come up. The thought is, oh, it's going to be hot today. Those are thoughts, and they're fine. Or, it's a beautiful day. I'm going to do something for myself. So it's a beautiful day, consciousness. I'm going to do something for myself, thought. And that's the way it works. The difference between consciousness and thought is the difference between ellipses, open-ended, ... and a period at the end of the sentence. Thoughts are structured. Thoughts are temporary. Thoughts are like sculptures or statues. They're defined, and then there's a period at the end. That's the end of it. You have a lot of thoughts in your brain every day, and thoughts all the time. Thoughts about, even right now as we're talking, thoughts about, well, do you understand this? Do you want to understand it? Thoughts about, oh, that was so clever, Adamus. Those are all thoughts. Ultimately, consciousness is really, you don't even need words like it's a beautiful day. Consciousness would just simply be, it is. ... How about that on the board? It is. Where you're not even trying to put anything on it. A little something's fine. It's a beautiful day. That's good. That's conscious. But ultimately, it's simply, it is. It is. And then you feel it. And you experience it. You experience the feeling. Then you could go out and experience that in a physical and mental form. It is. But for right now, you could throw a couple extra words in there. It's a beautiful day. You take a deep breath and you feel it. That is consciousness. That is awareness. I bring this up because so often it's difficult to discern what is consciousness and what is thought. What part of me is consciousness? Is consciousness simply something that goes through the cerebral cortex of the brain, and it's emanated from there and then connects and communicates with every other part of me? No, that's a thought. And no, it doesn't begin in the cerebral cortex of the brain. It's part of the brain that takes consciousness and flattens it, puts it into thoughts and words. Consciousness, where is it? everywhere. It's everywhere you are. It has to be, otherwise there wouldn't be anything else. If you weren't here, there would be nothing. So consciousness is everywhere. It's not just in the brain or just in the body. It is in those things, but it's everywhere. Consciousness doesn't take up space, and it's not synced into any form of time. It's just there. Consciousness, it is. I am. Thoughts, on the other hand, are defined, oftentimes judgmental, oftentimes put into words so they can be communicated supposedly more effectively. Thoughts are what builds an identity. And I'd like that on a separate sheet of paper. Thoughts are what build your identity. Consciousness doesn't build identities, but thoughts are what builds identities and makes you into what you are, makes you a very unique individual and very complex form of being on the planet. But it's all the thoughts, the thought that I'm a certain age, the thought that I don't feel good today, the thought that I got so much to do, the thought that I can't wait for the next shout. Those are all thoughts, some good, some not so good. And you're used to these thoughts constantly jabbering away in your head. And then you think it's consciousness. You think that's who you are. It's not. They're just thoughts. They're just thoughts. And you have far too many of them running through the brain right now. You are consciousness. You are consciousness. I am that I am. It's a beautiful day. I love the taste of my meal. That's consciousness. That's awareness. And then it goes into thought. Oftentimes these tomatoes are really fresh. The fish has a nice seasoning on it. The cake is so sweet and delectable. Those are thoughts. But consciousness is, I love that I'm so connected to the energy of my meal. That's a consciousness with 4 dots behind it. Ultimately, though, as I said, it is. I am, it is. That's consciousness. But humans need more words than that. Let's feel into your consciousness right now. It's not in a specific place, and it doesn't come from your brain, and it's not thoughts. It is simply, it is. I am, it is. It's awareness. Consciousness by itself will never create an identity. It will not create an identity. It is very fluid, open, flowing. It's a ... at the end of a sentence. It keeps going. It doesn't stop. It flows. It flows from, you could say, one sense of consciousness into another, one awareness into another awareness. It's very, very open-ended. You are consciousness. And the consciousness doesn't tell you what to do at all. The consciousness is simply aware of what you are doing. The consciousness doesn't create an identity. The consciousness is the true you. It doesn't think. It doesn't need to think. It is simply I am that I am. The consciousness is the true answers within inside yourself. Those thoughts running through your brain, especially when you're trying to figure something out and then you've got conflicting thoughts, those are just thoughts. Come back to your consciousness. I am that I am. ... Meaning, I am that I am. Now let me jump in and experience it. But unlike Giuseppe, let's not get stuck. Let's dive into the thoughts. Let's dive into the experience. Let's dive into the joy of it if you want, or the suffering if you want. It doesn't matter. Let's dive into it. But it's the ellipses. It's the continuation. Yes, you could say that thoughts continue all the time, but it's a series of thoughts, sentences with periods at the end, defined, structured, like the mind. The mind, it generates thoughts. It perceives consciousness in a way. in a very limited way. And then it sets up thoughts which shape your identity. And that's fine for a while until you get cast into it. Thoughts in the mind. Interesting thing about the mind. And this is very important as we go forward, because I bring all this up because your mind is changing. You're coming back to more a consciousness-oriented reality than a thought-based mental structure reality. You're coming back to more consciousness and more identification with the all that you are, not the little that you are.